Have you ever wondered what lies beyond the final heartbeat? Imagine living an ordinary life, full of daily worries and dreams, and suddenly being thrust into an experience so profound, so terrifying, yet so full of hope that it forever changes the course of your existence. Tonight, you will hear the true story of a woman who died and returned, not just with memories of another realm, but with a burning message for all of us. She witnessed a vision so powerful, a rain of fire falling from the sky, devastating cities across the world, that her words have become a warning for humanity. But amidst the destruction, she saw something even more astonishing. Groups of people bathed in divine light, protected while chaos raged around them. She returned to this life with a mission, to tell us what she saw, and to share the hope that remains even in the darkest of times. What would you do if you were given a glimpse of humanity's fate? Would you change the way you live? Would you warn the world? Let yourself feel every word of this story. Imagine if it were you, or someone you love. And as you watch, I want you to ask yourself, do you believe in second chances? Do you think humanity can change? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start this journey together. Her name is Marianne d'Almeida. She is 58 years old, and she lives in the vibrant city of Lisbon, Portugal. If you were to pass her on the street, you might not notice anything extraordinary. A gentle woman with soft, caring eyes, always carrying a book or two, her silver hair usually tied back in a loose bun. Marianne has spent most of her adult life as an elementary school teacher. She has raised 2 children as a single mother, weathering both storms and moments of quiet joy. Her world is one of small apartments, long bus rides, shared laughter over simple meals, and endless patience for her students, children who, for many, feel like her own. She is, in many ways, like so many of us, someone who dreams, who doubts, who sometimes lies awake at night, wondering about the meaning of it all. She worries about her children, about her aging mother, about the future of the world. So much violence, so much uncertainty. Lately, she has been feeling a heaviness she can't explain, a silent fear that maybe time is running out, for herself, for everyone. Her faith is quiet, but real. She lights candles in church, whispers prayers for those she loves, and secretly asks God if He is truly there. Sometimes, when the world feels too dark, she questions whether her prayers reach anywhere at all. Yet despite these doubts, Marianne is someone who always tries to choose kindness. She helps a neighbor with groceries. She listens to her students' worries about family problems. She gives what little she has, because she believes deep down that love is the only thing that lasts. But she is also human. She struggles with resentment, regret, and an ache for meaning. She wonders, am I enough? Is there really a purpose to all this pain? If there is a God, why is the world so broken? These questions haunted her, sometimes keeping her awake at night. She often felt invisible, just another face in a crowd. Yet she never imagined that everything she believed, and everything she feared, would soon be put to the ultimate test. Pause for a moment. Can you see yourself in Marianne? Have you ever felt invisible, or doubted your own purpose? What's the one question you would ask if you could speak to God, even just once? Write your answer in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your story may touch someone else watching this right now. Marianne's days often began before the sun had fully risen over the tiled rooftops of Lisbon. The city was waking up, trams rattling, shopkeepers pulling up metal grates, distant church bells echoing through the narrow streets. Her apartment, small but warm, was filled with little reminders of a life lived for others. A faded photograph of her children on the mantel, a chipped mug from her mother's kitchen, stacks of lesson plans and children's drawings crowding her desk. She'd quietly make coffee, careful not to wake her mother, who now lived with her after a minor stroke. Sometimes she would linger in the doorway, watching the older woman sleep, praying silently that there would be no more emergencies, no more late-night calls, no more hospitals. Marianne's children, Anna and Miguel, were both grown now. Anna working long shifts as a nurse, Miguel struggling to find steady work after college. Still, every week they would gather for Sunday lunch, laughter and arguments blending together, reminding Marianne of how quickly time was slipping through her fingers. Despite her worries, Marianne's greatest source of joy was her students. Her classroom was a sanctuary for children who carried burdens far heavier than any backpack. Kids facing divorce, poverty, or neglect. She saw herself in some of them. Quiet, observant, sometimes afraid. She made it her mission to create a space where every child felt seen. Sometimes on her way home, she would cry, not out of sadness, but out of a desperate hope that her care was making a difference. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a growing sense of emptiness. The world outside seemed to be changing faster than she could understand. Climate disasters, economic crises, political hatred, war. Every night, she'd watch the news and feel her faith being tested. How could a loving God allow so much suffering? Had humanity crossed a line from which there was no return? She tried to quiet these fears with rituals, lighting candles for peace, donating to charity, offering gentle words to anyone who seemed in need. Still, the anxiety was always there, lurking just beneath her smile. She worried for her children's future, for her students, for the world her grandchildren might inherit one day. Sometimes, late at night, Marianne would stand at her window and look up at the stars. She'd remember her father telling her that every soul was created for a reason. But what was hers? Had she missed her true calling? Or was loving others, in small, unseen ways, enough? Marianne never spoke of these doubts. She hid them behind her gentle demeanor, always putting others first. But deep inside, she longed for a sign, something, anything, to show her that her life had meaning, and that hope was still possible, even in the face of overwhelming darkness. Pause and reflect for a moment. Have you ever felt the world growing heavier, like Marianne did? Do you sometimes wonder if your kindness or small daily acts truly matter? What's one thing you do to find hope when everything seems uncertain? Share your answer in the comments. You never know who might need your words today. The day of the accident. It was a Thursday that began like any other. The spring air was heavy with the scent of blooming jacarandas, their purple blossoms blanketing the cobbled sidewalks of Lisbon. Marianne woke with a strange feeling, an ache behind her ribs that she couldn't name, a sense that something was shifting, though she tried to dismiss it as just another sleepless night. She moved through her morning routine in slow motion, careful as always, fixing breakfast for her mother, gathering her lesson plans, listening to the radio as distant rain clouds gathered beyond the window. As she left her apartment, she paused to kiss her mother's forehead, whispering a promise to be home by 6. In her bag, she tucked a note from Anna, her daughter reminding her, as always, to take care of herself. Work felt strangely surreal that day. The laughter of her students seemed both brighter and farther away, as if she were hearing them from the bottom of a well. She tried to focus on their lessons, reading, arithmetic, gentle encouragement for a shy girl who had just moved to Lisbon. But her mind kept wandering to a feeling of unease she couldn't shake. The day passed quickly, a blur of voices and movement. At the end of the school day, rain had begun to fall, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the windows as the sky grew dark long before evening. Marianne waited a little longer at school, grading papers, chatting with the cleaning lady about family and worries. She almost decided to call Anna for a ride home, but something in her, perhaps pride, perhaps habit, made her step out alone, umbrella in hand, into the now heavy storm. As she hurried down the street, puddles reflecting the city's golden lights, she replayed the day in her mind. She thought of her students, her mother waiting at home, the comforting routines that anchored her life. The rain blurred her vision, but she pressed on, eager for the warmth of her apartment and a hot meal. She never saw the car coming. It happened so quickly. A screech of tires, the flash of headlights, a desperate shout from across the street. In an instant, Marianne felt herself weightless, suspended between earth and sky. There was a crushing impact, a shattering pain, the sensation of falling through space. She remembered the sharp taste of blood, the cold water soaking through her coat, the roar of the rain mixing with distant sirens. And then, suddenly, nothing, just silence. For a moment, there was no fear, only a strange, gentle awareness, the sound of her own heartbeat slowing, the city fading away, the sensation of drifting, as if her soul was loosening from her body like a thread pulled free. She felt the world growing quieter, softer. She was no longer wet, or cold, or in pain. The worries of her life, her mother's illness, her children's future, the fate of her students, all seemed to dissolve into the background, replaced by a vast, impossible stillness. In those final seconds, Marianne's last conscious thought was not of herself, but of those she loved. She tried to hold on to their faces, to whisper their names, hoping somehow that her love would reach them, even as her own life slipped away. Take a moment and imagine yourself in Marianne's place. If today was your last ordinary day, what would you wish you had done differently? Is there someone you would call, something you would say, a regret you would want to make right? Share your reflections in the comments below. Sometimes the things left unsaid are the most important. The crossing, sensations at the moment of death. In that suspended silence, time seemed to unravel. Marianne felt herself drifting, not falling, not rising, but floating gently as if held by unseen hands. The pain that had moments before consumed her was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace she had never known in life. The roar of the storm, the shouts of strangers, even the distant wail of ambulance sirens, all of it faded until there was nothing left but the steady rhythmic sound of her own breath. And then, even that melted away. At first, Marianne was confused. She was aware of herself, but not of her body. She tried to move, to reach for the ground or the air, but she had no weight, no hands, no shape. The world below was distant, shimmering with a soft, golden haze. She looked down, somehow, instinctively, and saw the scene she had left behind, her crumpled form lying motionless on the wet street, people gathering, umbrellas blooming like flowers over her broken body. She saw the worry on the faces of strangers, felt their concern as if it were her own. But instead of panic, she was enveloped in a comfort that wrapped around her like warm sunlight. She noticed the rain falling through her, not onto her, each drop sparkling and vanishing, as if the laws of nature no longer applied. She heard voices, some frantic, others gentle, and realized they were not only the voices of the living, but also soft whispers that seemed to rise from within her own soul, words of reassurance, echoes of every prayer she had ever uttered. She felt the presence of something, someone, radiant and loving, drawing her onward. Colors became more vivid than she had ever seen. The sky, though heavy with clouds, seemed to open in places, revealing a brightness so pure it brought tears to her eyes, if she still had eyes to cry. Sounds lost their harsh edges and became music, the rhythm of raindrops, the beating of hearts, the hush of collective sorrow and hope. Marianne felt herself drawn upward, not by force, but by an irresistible longing, a memory of home she had forgotten she possessed. For a moment, she thought of her children, her mother, her unfinished life. She tried to hold on to regret, to sadness, but these feelings seemed to dissolve, replaced by an overwhelming sense of understanding, of everything she had done, every moment of kindness and every mistake, being woven together into something beautiful. It was as if her entire existence was laid out before her, not in judgment, but in a gentle embrace. She was not alone. She sensed other presences, peaceful, welcoming, without form or face, yet unmistakably familiar. There was no language, only communication, pure thought, emotion, love. The fear of death vanished, replaced by a certainty that life, in all its mystery and messiness, was precious beyond measure. In this space between worlds, Marianne felt herself expanding, becoming part of something far greater than her own story. She realized that she was connected to every soul she had ever met, every act of kindness, every word left unspoken. She understood, in an instant, how fragile and beautiful human life is, how every second matters, even the ones we wish away. It was then that she became aware of a new light, growing stronger, beckoning her forward. She felt drawn, not by curiosity, but by a deep sense of belonging, an invitation to discover what lies beyond the veil. Pause and imagine this moment. If you could see your own life from above, what would stand out? Would you be surprised by what truly mattered, or by the ways you touched others without even knowing? Write your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective could bring comfort or inspiration to someone else who needs it. The spiritual world. Encounter with a divine entity. Marianne drifted toward the growing light, a soft brilliance that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was brighter than any sun she had ever seen, yet it did not blind her. Instead, it warmed her through and through, dissolving the last remnants of fear and uncertainty. She felt weightless and transparent, as if every secret, every sorrow she had ever carried was being gently lifted from her shoulders. The boundary between her old world and this new place was subtle, almost imperceptible. One moment she was hovering over the rain-soaked street. The next, she found herself in a realm where time felt different, expansive and eternal, but also intimately personal. She stood, or rather existed, on a landscape unlike any she had ever known. Rolling fields of iridescent light, flowers that seemed to sing, rivers flowing with what looked like liquid crystal, all pulsing with a gentle living energy. The air itself was alive with music, a harmony that resonated with the deepest parts of her soul. Colors here were not just seen, but felt. Each hue carried its own emotion, a language beyond words. The blue of the sky filled her with peace. The gold beneath her feet hummed with purpose. The green around her glowed with healing and hope. It was as if she had stepped inside the very heart of creation, a place where nothing was hidden and everything was forgiven. And then she sensed a presence, a being of such immense love and compassion that Marianne felt herself bowing in awe, not with her body, but with her spirit. The light intensified, and from within, it stepped a figure, radiant and kind, eyes overflowing with an understanding so profound, it made her want to weep. She recognized without words who this was. For Marianne, raised in quiet Christian faith, there was no doubt. She was standing before Jesus. Yet this presence was more than any image or story she had ever known. The face she saw radiated infinite love, not only for her, but for every soul who had ever lived. There was no judgment in his gaze, only a deep, aching empathy. She felt seen in a way she never had before, not only for her goodness, but also for her brokenness, her doubts, her failures, her longing to be better. He spoke, but not with words. His voice was a vibration inside her, a truth she suddenly remembered as if it had always been there. You are loved. You have never been alone. Every act of kindness, every prayer, every moment of struggle, none of it was wasted. Everything matters. The being reached out, and Marianne felt her entire life pass before her in a wave, not as a series of mistakes and regrets, but as a tapestry of choices, each one woven with the thread of love or the ache of longing. She understood, in an instant, the ripple effect of every small kindness, every moment she listened or forgave, every time she chose hope over bitterness. She was shown the wounds of her heart, but instead of shame, she felt healing. She saw herself through his eyes, beloved, imperfect, worthy of redemption. The burdens she had carried for so many years, her fear for her children, her doubt about the future, her guilt for not being enough, were washed away in a flood of light and mercy. In this presence, Marianne felt connected not only to God, but to every living soul. She realized that each of us, in our own way, is on a journey back to this light, through pain, through joy, through all the messiness of being human. She wanted to stay forever, to melt into this love and never return. But even as she basked in this embrace, she sensed there was more she needed to see. She knew somehow that what was coming next would change not only her, but perhaps the fate of many. Take a moment to breathe this in. If you could stand before the ultimate source of love and compassion, what would you want to ask or say? Do you believe every act of kindness truly matters, even if no one else sees it? Share your feelings or questions in the comments below. Your openness might bring comfort to someone who feels invisible or alone. The vision of the fire rain, the catastrophe unveiled. Suddenly, the beautiful landscape around Marianne began to shift. The soft golden fields faded, the music of the rivers dimmed, and a sense of gravity pressed in upon her spirit. She was still in the presence of the radiant being, but the warmth in the air took on a sobering quality, like sunlight dimming before a storm. Marianne felt her soul being drawn toward a new vision, a revelation she knew was not just for her, but for all humanity. The light around her became like a great window, opening outward beyond the spiritual world and into the fabric of Earth itself. She saw continents, oceans, and cities, places she recognized, and many she did not. The world appeared both breathtakingly beautiful and heartbreakingly fragile. She saw people in every corner of the globe, living their ordinary lives, parents hugging their children, workers rushing through busy streets, friends laughing in cafes, lonely souls searching for hope. Then, the sky darkened. Marianne watched, powerless, as heavy clouds rolled over the earth. Thunder rumbled with a voice that was both warning and lament. Suddenly, from the heavens, streaks of fire began to descend, not as simple lightning or a passing storm, but as an endless, terrifying rain of burning embers. The fire fell with a fury that shook the soul, crashing into rooftops, devouring forests, melting highways, and swallowing entire neighborhoods in waves of heat and light. She saw cities she knew: Lisbon, Paris, New York, São Paulo, each one caught beneath this raining fire. Buildings that had stood for centuries collapsed in moments. Rivers boiled, skies turned crimson, and screams echoed in every language. She saw parents clutching their children, lovers embracing, strangers reaching for each other in desperate solidarity. For a moment, the whole world seemed to be burning. Hopes, dreams, and the very fabric of what people believed to be unshakable. But it was not just physical destruction. Marianne felt in her spirit the shattering of illusions: pride, greed, hatred, and indifference. The poisons that had divided humanity for so long were burning away, exposed and consumed by this relentless fire. The world's arrogance, its neglect of the sacred, its disregard for the vulnerable, all of it was laid bare. She saw not only suffering, but an overwhelming sense of loss. Dreams turned to ash, monuments of achievement crumbling to nothing, the cries of regret rising louder than the flames themselves. It was not only the loss of buildings and bodies, but of innocence, of missed chances, of love unexpressed. Yet, even as the fire raged, Marianne sensed that this was not simply punishment. It was a desperate warning, a call for awakening, for repentance, for the rediscovery of compassion. The vision was so real, so visceral, that she felt herself tremble with fear and grief for all humanity. But then, amid the devastation, something extraordinary happened. Through the haze and heat, Marianne noticed pockets of brightness, small groups of people scattered across the world who seemed untouched by the flames. Around these souls, a radiant shield of light shimmered, making the fires swerve away from them as if repelled by an invisible force. These people, men, women, children of every background, were united not by wealth or status, but by something far deeper: their compassion, their humility, their willingness to forgive and serve. They knelt in prayer, embraced one another, offered water and shelter to strangers. Some wept for the suffering of others. Some sang hymns of hope. Some simply held each other close. Around them, the fire could not enter. The light that protected them was both gentle and mighty, a testimony to a higher promise. Marianne understood, without being told, that this vision was not a guarantee of doom, but a chance for salvation, a revelation of what still remained possible. The rain of fire was a warning. Humanity was on the edge of self-destruction, but there was still a way back. Those who chose love, compassion, and humility could become vessels of hope in the darkest of times. She felt her heart breaking and healing at the same time, a grief for what might be lost, and a fierce hope that not all was doomed. The being beside her gently placed a hand on her shoulder, letting her know that this vision, as terrifying as it was, came from a place of love and deep longing for every soul to awaken before it was too late. Pause, and let this vision settle in your mind. What would you do if you knew the world was on the brink? If you could choose, would you be among those standing in the fire, or sheltered in the light of compassion and humility? Share your honest answer in the comments. Your perspective could help someone else searching for hope or direction. The protected by the light, the meaning of divine shelter. As Marianne gazed upon the devastation unleashed by the rain of fire, her attention kept returning to those islands of light, groups of people untouched by the flames, standing firm amidst chaos. At first, she thought it was a miracle reserved for saints or spiritual leaders, those she had always considered holier than herself. But as she looked closer, the truth astonished her. The protected were not the powerful or the privileged. They were ordinary people: nurses, factory workers, old women praying in small kitchens, fathers embracing their children, teenagers comforting strangers. There were no golden crowns, no special garments, Nothing to set them apart except for the simple, profound acts of love that radiated from their hearts. The divine light shielding them wasn't earned through grand gestures or perfect faith, but through the way they treated one another every day. Marianne watched as these people opened their homes to those fleeing the fire, shared food with hungry strangers, wept for the suffering even when they themselves were afraid. Some stood with empty hands, but their hearts were full. She saw a young man lay down his jacket to shield a trembling child, an elderly couple sharing their last piece of bread with a stranger, a group of teenagers forming a human chain to rescue the injured. Each act, no matter how small, glowed with a luminous energy that pushed back the flames. She noticed, too, that those shielded by the light weren't without pain or fear. They trembled, they cried, they doubted, yet even in their weakness, they chose to hold on to hope and help one another. The protection wasn't about escaping the world's suffering, but about facing it together with hearts open to love. Marianne understood that this light was a living force, born from compassion, forgiveness, and humility. It could not be faked or demanded. It was freely given to those who truly cared for others, regardless of belief or background. She also saw some people who stood alone, isolated by pride or bitterness. Despite their prayers or rituals, the light did not surround them, not because they were unloved by God, but because their hearts were closed to others. Marianne felt a wave of sorrow for them, realizing that the choice to open our hearts is what invites the shelter of the divine. As she watched, the radiant being beside her spoke again, his words filling her soul. This is the great secret. Love is the strongest shelter. Those who care for others become the light that cannot be consumed. The world's salvation will not come from power, but from kindness lived out in the darkest moments. Marianne wept with gratitude, realizing that even the smallest act, a gentle word, a helping hand, a prayer for someone in need, could become a shield in times of trial. She remembered her own life, the ways she had chosen compassion, and also the moments she had failed. Yet, she knew now that every time she had loved, she had been part of this unbreakable light. She wanted to shout this truth to the world, to tell everyone, you are not powerless. Your kindness matters more than you can ever imagine. In the end, it is love that will protect us when nothing else can. Take a deep breath and reflect. When have you felt protected? Not just physically, but emotionally or spiritually, by someone's kindness? Or have you ever been that shelter for another person, even in a small way? Share your stories or thoughts in the comments. Your experience might inspire someone to become a light in someone else's darkness. The message and the warning, a call to humanity. As the vision faded, Marianne found herself standing once more in the presence of the radiant being. The landscape of devastation and fire gave way to an expanse of shimmering peace, a sacred silence, as if all of heaven was waiting. Marianne's heart pounded, filled with questions. Why had she been shown such horrors? What was she supposed to do with this impossible knowledge? She felt small, humbled, and desperately afraid for the world she loved. The being, still shining with boundless compassion, regarded her gently. His eyes seemed to hold the sorrows and hopes of every soul that ever lived. Marianne sensed that he was not only speaking to her, but through her, to every human heart willing to listen. In a voice that resonated deeper than sound, felt in every cell of her being, he delivered the message. Tell them the time is short. The world stands at a crossroads between love and destruction, between the fire of pride and the shelter of compassion. Humanity's future is not fixed. What you do, what each person does from this moment, matters more than you can imagine. The reign of fire is not only a prophecy of disaster, but a mirror to the state of human hearts. Every act of hatred, every choice to turn away from those in need, every moment of indifference, these are sparks that feed the coming storm. But every act of love, every gesture of forgiveness, every hand reaching out to help, these are seeds of light that can grow into a shelter strong enough to protect the world. Marianne trembled at the gravity of these words. She saw images rush past her, conflicts raging in distant lands, families torn apart by bitterness, the earth suffering from greed and neglect. She saw children fleeing violence, oceans choking with plastic, forests burning, and old wounds festering between nations and neighbors. The world seemed poised on a knife's edge, teetering between renewal and ruin. But she also saw flashes of hope, young people marching for peace, strangers embracing across old divides, communities rising up to care for the vulnerable, and ordinary people sacrificing for the sake of others. She saw her own students, their innocent laughter a fragile but unbreakable thread tying the future to the present. The message was both a warning and a plea. There is still time, but the window is closing. If enough hearts awaken, if enough people choose love over fear, then even the fire can be turned away. The choice is given to all. Do not waste another day. Be the shelter. Be the light. Marianne felt the responsibility settle upon her like a mantle. She was just one woman, flawed, often afraid, sometimes doubting, but she knew in that moment that her life had been given a mission. She was to become a messenger, to speak these truths no matter how much the world doubted or ignored them. The being's final words echoed in her soul, a charge she would carry for the rest of her days. Remember, it is not too late, but soon it may be. The future will be shaped by love or by fire. The choice belongs to every soul. Go, and let them know. Tears streamed down Marianne's face. She thought of her children, her students, her neighbors, even those she had once called enemies. She thought of humanity, not as a collection of strangers, but as one great family, bound together by fate, by suffering, and by the possibility of redemption. When the vision ended, Marianne was left with a fierce urgency, a sense that there was no time for silence, for waiting, for letting fear or doubt win. The message was clear. Everyone is called. Everyone can make a difference. Every heart matters. Please, pause for a moment and let this message touch you. What would you do if you knew the future depended on your actions, your choices, your love? Are there sparks of division or anger in your own life that you could transform into seeds of compassion? Who do you need to forgive or ask forgiveness from before it's too late? Share your reflections in the comments. Sometimes, sharing your intention out loud is the first step toward real change. Your words may inspire someone else to become the difference the world needs right now. The return and the struggle. Coming back changed. Suddenly, Marianne felt herself being pulled back, away from the radiance, away from the perfect peace and the presence that felt like home. There was no sense of punishment, only an urgent need, as if the entire spiritual world was telling her, "It is not your time. There is work for you to do." The journey back was not gentle. Where moments before she had floated in warmth and light, now she felt herself tumbling, collapsing inward, as if squeezing the infinite into a single point. There was a rush of color and sound, a sudden weight, and then the sharp, cold pain of returning to a broken body on a rain-soaked Lisbon street. Voices, real, frightened, human, surrounded her, hands pressed on her chest, paramedics calling her name. The agony was overwhelming, but even through the pain, Marianne felt the afterglow of her encounter with the divine. She was aware of everything, the sirens, the frantic shouting, her own body trembling and bleeding, but she was not afraid. She knew, with a certainty deeper than any she'd ever known, that she had to survive. She had to deliver the message, but surviving was only the beginning of her struggle. Marianne spent weeks in the hospital, drifting in and out of consciousness. She underwent surgeries, fought infection, and endured the daily pain of recovery. Her body was battered, and so was her mind. Doctors and nurses marveled at her calm, but only Marianne understood the burden she carried. Each night, she replayed the vision, the fire, the suffering, the islands of light, and wondered, how could she possibly make others believe? Returning to ordinary life was a trial of its own. Friends and family wanted to help, but most could not understand what she had experienced. Some dismissed her story as delirium, a trick of the dying brain. Others avoided the subject entirely, uncomfortable with talk of death and prophecy. Even her beloved children, Anna and Miguel, listened politely but with worried eyes, as if afraid their mother was slipping away from reality. Marianne felt alone in a way she never had before. The world seemed both more beautiful and more fragile. Every smile, every moment of kindness, now a miracle. Every act of hatred, a tragedy. She moved through her days haunted by urgency, longing to share what she had seen, yet fearful of being dismissed or mocked. Sometimes she wondered if she had imagined it all. Was the vision real, or just a comfort for a dying woman? But the memory would not fade. Night after night, she saw the fire, heard the voices, felt the warmth of the light. She remembered the words, "Be the shelter, be the light. It is not too late." Gradually, Marianne realized that her mission was not to convince everyone at once, but to start with one person at a time: her children, her students, her neighbors, even strangers on the tram. She told her story quietly, honestly, without trying to persuade, only to witness. There were moments of hope: a student who changed his ways after hearing her story, a nurse who broke down in tears and confessed her own struggles, a neighbor who returned after years of silence to offer forgiveness. Small ripples began to spread, and Marianne saw that the light she had witnessed in her vision was already growing, one heart at a time. Yet the struggle remained. She faced rejection, ridicule, and sometimes despair. She missed the peace of that other world, the certainty and comfort of being held in the light. There were days when the burdens of life, her mother's declining health, Anna's exhaustion, Miguel's anxieties, threatened to crush her spirit. But in those moments, she remembered the faces of those protected by the light, and she held on. Marianne learned that the hardest part of a miracle is living with it. Transformation is not easy. The world does not always want to hear the truth, especially when it calls for change. But she also learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. Take a moment and ask yourself, if you received a message this urgent, one that others might not believe, would you have the courage to share it? Have you ever faced rejection or loneliness because you followed your heart or your convictions? Write about your experience in the comments below. Someone else might be struggling to find their own voice and need your encouragement to keep going. In the months and years that followed her return, Marianne's life transformed in ways she could never have predicted. Though her body carried new scars and moved with more difficulty, her heart had become a source of quiet fire. The message she brought back from the brink of eternity was not a burden. It was a beacon, guiding her every day, even when the path ahead was hard. Marianne became, in her own humble way, a messenger. Not a preacher standing on street corners, not a prophet with crowds at her feet, but a living, breathing example of love's transformative power. She returned to her teaching, pouring even more patience and compassion into her students, knowing now that every wounded child, every struggling soul, was sacred beyond words. She found new strength to care for her mother, to forgive old hurts within her family, to reach out to those in her community who were overlooked or forgotten. But perhaps the most remarkable change was inside her. The Marianne who had once worried constantly about being enough no longer lived in the shadow of shame or regret. She knew, with unshakable certainty, that every act of kindness, every risk taken to love or forgive, was like planting a seed in the world, one that could bloom even in the darkest soil. She no longer waited for perfect moments. She seized the ordinary, understanding now that hope begins with the courage to act, to reach out, to build bridges where others have burned them. She still struggled. There were days when the world's pain seemed unbearable, when her vision felt more like a curse than a blessing. She faced skepticism, sometimes even anger, from those who didn't want to hear about fire or judgment, who refused to believe in miracles. There were moments when she wanted to retreat, to go back to a life of quiet anonymity. But each time she was tempted to give up, she would remember the vision, the rain of fire, yes, but also the islands of light, the faces of those protected by love, the words that still echoed in her soul. Marianne realized that her mission was not only to warn, but to ignite hope, to show people that no matter how dark the night, even the smallest flame can push back the shadows. Her story began to spread, first among her students, then their families, and finally through letters, talks, and eventually gatherings where people of all faiths and backgrounds came to listen, to share their own stories, and to find solace and inspiration together. She learned, over and over, that transformation rarely happens in grand gestures or dramatic revelations. It happens in the quiet moments: a mother comforting a frightened child, a neighbor offering food to someone in need, a stranger pausing to listen instead of judging. These acts, invisible to the world, are the very fabric of divine shelter. Marianne's life became a living testimony to the truth she'd been shown. Every soul matters. Every heart can be a sanctuary. Every person, no matter how broken, can become a bearer of light. In the face of a world that still trembled on the edge, her message was simple, yet urgent. Do not wait for someone else to save the world. The power to transform, to protect, to heal is within you. You are the hope. You are the light. The time to act is now. As the years passed, Marianne found peace not in answers, but in the journey itself. She never claimed to be perfect, never pretended to be fearless, but she had seen, with the eyes of the soul, that love is the only shelter strong enough to withstand the coming storms, whether they be fires that fall from the sky or the slow burn of loneliness, anger, and despair. Tonight, her story reaches you, not by accident, but as a spark, an invitation. Maybe you are the one meant to carry her message forward, to become a light in your own family, your community, your corner of the world. So before you go, take a moment to look within. What change can you make starting today to become a shelter for someone else? What act of kindness, forgiveness, or courage can you offer, even if no one sees or thanks you? And what legacy do you want to leave behind when your own journey here is done? Please, share your thoughts in the comments below, not just for yourself, but for all those who are searching for hope, longing to believe that even in the face of fire, there can still be light. Tell us, what will you do to make the world brighter, starting now? Let your words inspire, connect, and heal. You are the hope the world needs.